Hey everybody, hope you guys are all doing well and keeping healthy in this really challenging time. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Nathan, and I teach at the Regent Park School of Music. I teach music theory, I teach drum set, I teach a little bit of piano, some percussion sometimes. I teach kind of a mixed bag of different classes. And today what I wanted to do is I wanted to take some time to teach you guys about major scales. What makes a major scale, how do we build major scales on all of the different notes of the piano or on whatever instrument you happen to be playing. So I'm going to break that down. I'm going to break down sort of the science of what makes a major scale a major scale. When I do it, I'm going to be using piano because I find piano to be a really strong visual tool to help people learn this stuff. Also because I have a piano in my house that I can demonstrate for you guys on. But if you play another instrument, if you play guitar, if you play ukulele, if you play violin, saxophone, anything, all of the stuff that I'm about to talk to you about applies to those instruments as well. So the theory that I'm gonna be talking about will apply, but you might want to talk to your teachers about the specific technique for how to play each of these scales on your instrument, because it's going to vary depending on your instruments. But the way that we choose the notes and the way that we decide which notes go in which scale is exactly the same across all instruments. So that's what I'm going to be talking with you about today. Let's get into it. Okay, hi everybody. So there's a few things that I need to sort of introduce you to before we can get into building major scales. And the most important one is, what does a major scale even sound like? So I'll start by teaching you a major scale. I'm obviously using piano here, but all of this applies to every instrument. So if you're playing violin at home, if you're playing ukulele, if you play guitar, if you play saxophone, flute, all of the stuff that I'm going to talk to you about in terms of major scales still applies to those instruments. I'm just going to use piano because I find it to be a really good visual tool. So first off, I'm going to teach you a C major scale. So many of you already know this. A C major scale is the scale that you get if you play all of the white notes on a piano from C to C. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. Right? One thing that you'll notice when I'm doing this is I'm using all of the white notes and I'm using all of the letter names. So if you're following along, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. Every note in this scale gets its own letter name. And that might seem obvious now, but later on when we're talking about different scales, it'll be really important that we keep that in mind. So that's the first thing we need to know. We need to know one scale for reference, and we need to know what a major scale sounds like. The next thing that we need to know is we need to know the difference between a whole step and a half step. So again, on piano, a half step is any movement from one note to the note directly adjacent to it. And I mean directly adjacent to it. So it doesn't matter if the note is a black note or a white note. A half step is when we go from one note to the note directly adjacent to it. So here, if I'm starting at C and I'm going up a half step, I'm going to go up to this C sharp or D flat, right? Same here, if I'm on D and I want to go up a half step, I'll go up to this D sharp or E flat. I'm going to the note directly adjacent. What if there's no black notes in between your notes? What if I want to go from this note and I want to go a half step up? I'm actually going to go to this note because they're the two notes that are directly next to each other on the piano. There's nothing in here, so these are the two closest notes that I can have. There's nothing that I can jump to. This is the next note directly above. What if I want to go down a half step? Same idea. Starting on this G, half step down would be this F sharp. Starting on this F, if I want to go down a half step, would be this E. Starting on this D, down a half step, would be C sharp. I can start on the black notes too. Starting on this F sharp, down a half step, would be this F. Starting on this E flat, up a half step, would be this E, right? So a half step is from any note to its adjacent note on the piano. So what about a whole step? A whole step is two half steps. So if I want to go from C and I want to go up a whole step, I'll go 1, 2. That's a whole step, right? If I'm starting at D and I want to go up a whole step, 1, 2. That's a whole step. What about if I'm starting at E? Same principle applies. 1 half step, 2 half steps. So this would be a whole step, skipping over this note. You'll notice with all of these, we're skipping one note, playing the next one. So that is a whole step. What if I'm going down? A, 1/2 step, 2/2 steps. That's a whole step, right? We're skipping this note in between. Same here if I want to go down. 1/2 step, 2/2 steps. We're skipping this note in between, right? So what makes a major scale is actually the order of half steps and whole steps that we see within the scale. So if I start on a C and play the scale up, it's going to sound different than if I start on D. That's not a major scale. It's not the same sound as this. And the reason for that is because we have different patterns of whole steps and half steps. And let me get into more details and show you what I mean about that. So here from C to D is a whole step because we're skipping this note. From D up to E, whole step again, we're skipping this note. E to F, half step, there's no note here to skip. These two notes are directly next to each other. F up to G, whole step, we're skipping that note. G up to A, whole step, we're skipping this note. A to B, whole step. B to C, half step, there's no note here to skip. So that a little bit faster is whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. So then if we start on D, whole step, half step. So that's not the right pattern. We want whole step, half step. If we have whole step, half step, that doesn't work. So that's why it doesn't really work to start on another white note and play up the piano. It gives you a different kind of scale. This is actually called a Dorian scale. And similar, when we start on all the other white notes, if we just play the white notes, it doesn't give us the same scale pattern. It gives us a different kind of scale altogether. It only works on C major. If we start on C and play up to C. So what if I wanted to start on D? What if I wanted to make a major scale but starting on D? So what we would have to do is we would have to use the same pattern of whole steps and half steps that we used for the C major scale, but started on D. So starting here, we want first a whole step. Then we want another whole step. So instead of going here, I would have to reach up to here. So this note would be an F sharp or a G flat. How would I know which one it is? Remember what I said before about each note, each scale using all of the letter names. We've got D, we've got E. Is this going to be an F sharp or a G flat? Well, if it's a G flat, then we've skipped the letter F. So we can't do that. So we'd have to call this an F sharp. So whole step, then we need a half step. Gets us to G. Then we need a whole step. Gets us to A. Then we need another whole step. Gets us to B. Then another whole step. So we'd have to skip this note, come up to here to get to this either C sharp or D flat. But since this was a B, we'll have to call this a C sharp to make sure we get C in the mix too, right? So that's a whole step. And then half step gets us back to D. And then that's our scale. So D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C sharp, D. That sounds more like a major scale, right? So that same pattern can be applied starting on any note. So let's start on F. If we play F without any black notes in it, it's very close to a major scale, but this note kind of sticks out a little bit. So let's figure it out. Starting on F, whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. So we would have to have F, G, A, B flat, C, D, E, and F. The same thing can be applied to absolutely every single note. So we've got 12 notes: C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A, B flat, B, C. And every single one of those 12 notes we can start a major scale on. So let's say I started at E flat. We go whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. So it'll be E flat to F, G, A flat, B flat, C, D, E flat. Right? So this can be applied all the way up the instrument. Etc. So my challenge for you is on your instrument. It doesn't have to be piano. Whatever instrument you happen to have lying around, I want you to go through and see how many different scales you can build. So start them on any note, pick the notes randomly, and see if you can build these scales. And let me show you one more thing. There's something you might run into as you're doing this at home. Let's say I start on G sharp. Maybe I'll start on this G sharp. It might fit better in the shot. Start on G sharp. Whole step above G sharp would be A sharp. Then another whole step would be B sharp. So B, okay, that's a little unusual, but you know, it's still acceptable. So G sharp, A sharp, B sharp. Then I would have C sharp for that half step, then D sharp, then E sharp, then this needs to have the name starting with F, but it's a G, so we would have to call that F double sharp to G sharp. So that's really confusing. So if you get to a scale that does that kind of doesn't make a lot of sense, try starting on the same note but using a different name. So instead of calling this G sharp, I'm going to call it A flat. See, let's see if this makes a little bit more sense. A flat, B flat, C, that makes sense so far, D flat, E flat, F, G, A flat. That makes a lot more sense than G sharp, A sharp, B sharp, C sharp, D sharp, E sharp, F double sharp, G sharp. That's way too confusing. If we change the name of this first note, so instead of calling it G sharp, we call it A flat, B flat, C flat, A flat, B flat, C natural, D flat, E flat, F, G, A flat. So if you come across a scale that doesn't seem to make a lot of sense, and you might think, well, I can't start a scale on this note, try using the other name for that note, and you'll probably find that it's a lot easier to do it that way. Okay, have fun with that challenge. Let us know how it goes. I'd love to hear from you all.